And welcome back, and I'm currently experiencing some chest pain. Not good.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Wright. I'm sorry for what my sister said.
By the way, don't drink alcohol when playing Ace Attorney. Or at least don't drink alcohol to deal with Ace Attorney, unless you are a seasoned drinker. I don't like feeling tipsy.
I never knew that the SL9 incident was just another name for the Joe Dark killings.
Sounds like everyone's heard about these killings but me. And me! I never heard of them before until they all brought it up in this case. And again, it won't be talked about again ever again, so...
No biggie. Lana wanted Dark convicted so badly. That's why she used me. That's why she used what happened to me.
What do you mean, what happened to you?
It's all there in the file.
No, it isn't. The file is only a listing of names. It doesn't say, well, this is what happened exactly in the case, and this is... Then again, maybe it isn't the case, and those names is the only thing Phoenix can actually read in that file. I'm not putting that past him.
Joe Dark's last victim was Prosecutor Neil Marshall. When he murdered Officer Marshall's brother, he left behind an incriminating piece of evidence.
But what did you have to do with those killings, Emma? She was a witness?
On the night Prosecutor Neil Marshall was murdered, Joe Dark tried to kill me.
What? He tried to kill you?
Officer Marshall's brother, Neil, was only trying to save me.
So that means you...
Yes, I was a witness in the Joe Dark trial.
I didn't see that one coming.
It's in the file!
I don't think showing anything to her will do any good, so... Let's talk about the SL9 incident. By the way, yes, I'm still tempted to stop mid-case and just go on to Apollo Justice. But as I said before, if I skip this case, I feel like I can't point out something that really doesn't make sense in Apollo Justice if you really don't have the connection to this. Yes, it has to do with Emma, but, you know, still.
It happened 2 years ago. It was right about this time of the year, too. There was a terrible thunderstorm that day, unusual for the season.
Maybe it's because I live in Germany, but thunderstorms really aren't that uncommon of a thing to happen around February. Then again, this takes place in Japanifornia, so maybe it is uncommon there. I don't know. I do remember being in California in January once, and it was actually pretty mild. Almost sunny.
I was alone in my sister's office. We were planning to eat dinner together once she finished her work. Then suddenly, this terrifying man came bursting into the office.
Joe Dark.
It seemed like he was running from someone. He pulled out a knife and screamed at me. I didn't know what was going on. Just then, Prosecutor Marshall showed up.
Jake Marshall's brother. Yes, Phoenix, thank you. I totally forgot about that.
Joe Dark tried to take me hostage, but before he could, Mr. Marshall tackled him. Then...
What happened?
I'll never forget it. Lightning struck, and the lights went out. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning flashed outside the window, lighting up the office for an instant. What I saw then burned a permanent picture in my mind. I can still see it now.
A permanent picture? What did you see in the instant that crime occurred? Joe Dark's hair looks like an onion.
Dark knocked down Mr. Marshall and raised his knife.
Neil Marshall was stabbed right in front of this poor girl. Yes.
I don't remember what happened after that. Apparently I passed out.
Oh my god, Lana's face actually looks animated and almost human.
When I came to, Lana was cradling me in her arms.
Poor Emma, you've been through so much.
I couldn't bring myself to testify about that incident. I tried, but the words just wouldn't come out.
I know the problem with words not coming out when you want to. It's quite annoying.
I drew a picture, but it wasn't any good.
Yes, we will see that picture later on, and indeed, that picture is not any good. 2 years ago, you must have been 14. That's understandable.
Once it was all over, I made up my mind. I decided that when I grew up, I'd become a scientific investigator. I want to be able to fight crimes with my own testimonies, and find the evidence to make an airtight case. That way, Lana would never have to forge any.
I see. I think I'm finally starting to understand what makes Emma tick. But there's still something that bothers me about that crime.
I don't remember the moment when Dark stabbed Mr. Marshall.
Okay, so you didn't actually see the stab, okay. So you weren't able to testify about that?
No, I was only asked about when I was attacked. That must be why why she made up the crime.
Made it up? You mean provided bogus evidence? Why you have to say this considering Lana, as good as possible, admitted to forging evidence in that case? Whatever.
The prosecutor's office wanted that guilty verdict so badly. Lana forged the evidence and Mr. Edgeworth used it.
Edgeworth? Yeah, he said he was the prosecutor for that case. You gotta think along a little bit, Phoenix.
Yes, but I'm sure he didn't know anything about it. He couldn't have known he was being given false evidence. Even so, that's when it all started. The rumors about Mr. Edgeworth, I mean. It's all my fault. If I could have just testified properly, none of this would have happened.
I like to disagree, considering what we learn later on. So it's true, even though he may not have known it. Edgeworth really was involved in falsifying evidence. No, he was involved in the usage of falsified test evidence. He was not the one who actually falsified it himself. And yes, this case retcons that about Edgeworth, which kind of takes something really cool about him away. It kind of makes him goody-goody boring.
She became cold like she is today.
She mustn't have been able to face up to what she did, especially not to Emma. Cowardly woman. There's something that's puzzling me, Emma.
What is it?
You said you were in Lana's office at that time, right?
That's right.
Why then would a serial killer come running in there? Not only that, but he was being chased by a prosecutor.
Oh, there's no mystery there. Joe Dark had been taken in for questioning that day.
Okay, so he was taken in. So, okay. Got that in my head. Taken in for questioning? You mean by the police?
Of course. This happened at the police department. He tried to run away halfway through the interview and fled into my sister's office.
But why did you run all the way over to your sister's office?
Because the detective office and the questioning room are right across from the elevator.
Across from the elevator? But Lana was the chief prosecutor, wasn't she?
No, silly! Didn't I tell you? 2 years ago, Lana was a detective.
No, you never mentioned that. That's actually a pretty important little detail about her. I'm surprised nobody has mentioned that like 5 times already.
She was the best in the entire force.
Yeah, that's news to me.
After the Joe Dark case, she was transferred to the prosecutor's office and made chief prosecutor without any court experience.
Okay.
Lana used to be a detective?
I'd better have another talk with her.
Lana!
Mr. Wright, it seems I keep causing you trouble. Falsifying evidence. I didn't think you were the type. Criminals don't mind playing foul. Why should we? Good question, actually.
But Lana, if you're wrong, an innocent person might be found guilty.
Believe me, I understand the risks. Lana? Wow, didn't he always call her Miss Sky first? Guess he must be really getting serious now on first name basis. Emma told me about you. Oh? About how you were a detective 2 years ago, and how the SL9 incident was the reason for your transfer to the prosecutor's office. That's right. Could you fill me in on the details? Especially about that unusual change of jobs. I suppose you have a right to know, Mr. Wright. Also, once again, I don't think showing anything will do anything, so... A lot of revelations were uncovered at the trial today, not the least of which was the fact that this case is largely connected to another one 2 years ago. Evidence from that case was stolen. I expected as much. But there was the glove, and the jar shards. They seem to be at the evidence room. That doesn't really count as stolen. I know how obsessive Officer Marshall can be.
That trial, it really wasn't fair, was it? I believed in you, Lana. I believed that no matter what happened, you'd always stick to the truth.
It couldn't be helped, Emma. At that trial 2 years ago, I sold my soul. Well, all drama aside, the fact of the matter is at 5:15 there was no murder at the police department.
Not at 5:15, yes. Tell me it's not true, Lana, what the witness, Miss Starr, said. About you stabbing Mr. Goodman with a knife?
Yes, she stabbed his corpse with a knife. I guess this counts as Leichenschändung, but technically she did stab Mr. Goodman. Depending on who you speak to, his soul having left, you probably think it's just the shell or whatever, but technically she's right.
Lana, I don't understand. Why won't you tell us?
Emma, this doesn't involve just me. I don't think I've ever seen Lana look so fazed before. It's true. I was a member of the police force 2 years ago.
She was amazing! They still talk about all the cases she and Chief Gant cracked together.
Chief Gant? Back then, he was the vice head of criminal affairs, but he still worked the crime scenes. Damon Gant, he was everything I aspired to be.
They were the best team ever! They solved crimes before the reports could even be filed!
Emma really idolizes her big sister. But now you're chief prosecutor. What happened? I always planned on becoming a prosecutor. The reason I became a detective was...
To gain experience investigating crime scenes so she could later use that experience in court.
It's a nice idea, but how exactly would that help in court? Unless, like, I don't know, somebody asked about details and how it worked, and she could tell them how a scene is investigated, in the case that an actual investigator is not in the courtroom at the time. Gan's help in the SL9 case was critical in its resolution. After that, he became chief of police and arranged my transfer to the prosecutor's office. Maybe I should ask more about this investigation of theirs 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I was second in command of the detectives investigating Dark. Second in command? That means the chief detective was no doubt Damon Gant? Yes, Detective Gant and I shared the same office and the same investigations. They even had the same office. We led a team of the best detectives on the force. Detective Goodman, whose case it was, Jake Marshall named her star. It was the first time Marshall worked with his brother. He was quite gung-ho. Without a doubt, Joe Dark was the serial killer. We asked him to come in for questioning. We were desperate for evidence. So... He wasn't really brought in. He was asked to come. It's very nice of him to come when asked. That's, very polite. And now you are desperate for, apparently, any evidence. Which is different from, as you recall, I wrote this down, Angel previously saying they had nothing decisive. Now she makes it sound like they had no evidence at all. So... what? That was when the last murder took place. When he tried to murder Emma.
Prosecutor Marshall was trying to save me from Dark.
You see, the first person who happened upon the scene of the crime was me. Now you tell us. Well, you didn't ask beforehand. Detective Gann and Prosecutor Marshall were the ones questioning Dark that day. The investigation was in its final stages when Dark must have panicked. He waited until Gant and Marshall let the guards down, then fled the room. I know an investigation room isn't the safest place, but weren't there other detectives or police force around, like outside of the room, to grab a suspect in the case of them running away during questioning? It doesn't make sense. From there, he ran straight to the office shared by Detective Grant and myself.
That's where he found me.
So, you were the first person to run to the scene, Lana? It appears so. I was filing some papers while Gant and Marshall were questioning Dark. I filed papers before. It's not terrible, it's just not very engaging. When I returned to my office, I saw 3 bodies on the floor and smelled blood. 3 bodies? Prosecutor Marshall, the victim, Emma, who had passed out, and the suspect, Joe Dark. During the struggle, it seems Mr. Marshall struck a final blow before he died. Joe Dark had incurred a minor concussion and lay unconscious. What did you do? To be honest, I panicked. I picked up Emma, carried her out of the room, and just held her. Can't blame her after all. Her sister must have gone through. After that, I placed Dark under immediate arrest. So, you grabbed your sister out and waited until she was awake without keeping the potential suspect handcuffed. Okay, she panicked, but Still... Let me get this straight. You were all involved in the SL9 incident?
That's right. Quite a coincidence.
I don't buy it.
What are you saying?
There's no way everyone involved in this trial was also involved in that incident just by chance.
But that case was solved 2 years ago!
At least one person went to extremes because they didn't believe it was truly solved.
Officer Marshall... Yes, his actions came as a surprise to me as well. Ever since his brother died, he's changed completely. I guess he wasn't convinced with the ruling against Joe Dark. Life doesn't end with the closing of a case. Everyone has to live the rest of their lives with their memories.
That case just might not be over yet. What makes you think that? Emma was assaulted by Dark at the police department, right?
Yes, in the office that Damon Gant and I shared. The office that Mr. Gant now occupies by himself. The Chief's office. Maybe we should have a look at the Chief's office. The site of the final SL9 murder.
Okay. Although why the vice chief or vice head of criminal affairs chooses to stay in the same office when he becomes, chief and gets a promotional, it means nothing. I don't see Detective Gumshoe anywhere.
Things seem kind of quiet around here today.
You're right. The head of the department seems the same, though.
Why don't we go look for some other people to talk to?
Right. We can come back here later. Fine. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be, I don't know, under arrest for assault, theft of the ID card. Why are you still around? Then again, considering Mike Meekins apparently ran around for a good 24 hours before he was arrested for a supposed crime. Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Marshall!
I never thought things turned out this way when I woke up this morning. Que sera, sera. You never know where life will lead you, eh, Bambina? By the way, according to a screenshot I saw in the HD iOS version or Android or whatever, it's que sera, sera. The A seems to have disappeared. Then again, that version seems to have a lot of glitches and mistakes. I should have known my luck had run out when old Billy dried up this morning. Is that your penis?
Billy?
Must be his pet cactus. Oh, okay. Say, where are you headed? Just over to the prosecutor's office for a little interrogation. Wouldn't interrogations be done at the police department? It's a voluntary appearance, but we all know I won't be coming back. Thank you! Sorry, but you can't go in the evidence room today, partner. Oh, no. How terrible.
But Mr. Marshall, why did you do it?
Why do prospectors head west? If ever there was a case I needed to know the truth about, it was that one. Before you turn yourself in, Mr. Marshall, would you mind telling us exactly what happened? Looks like I won't be getting a steak lunch today. I'm sure if you ask nicely, you might get one in your cell. Something was fishy about that trial from the beginning. It wasn't just me either. All the detectives thought so. What do you mean, fishy? Some of the facts reported were inconsistent with the evidence we found. So you did have evidence? For example, the murder weapon. The murder weapon? You mean that switchblade knife with the broken tip? That was Joe Dark's all right. But in the initial autopsy report, a question was raised.
A question?
The blade on the knife was not a perfect match with the wound the victim sustained.
What does that mean?
It means there is a good chance that knife was not the murder weapon. However, in the report that was finally submitted, that possibility had been erased.
Could the facts have been concealed with forged evidence?
I think so. That case left behind scars on all of us.
The scars that the SL9 incident left behind.
Let's talk about our scars. Scars are awesome. They tell interesting stories. There was something going on behind the scenes in that case. We all knew that later. Every detective involved in that investigation, save one, was taken care of. Miss Stahl was fired, now was demoted and boxed away in a tiny room.
What about Detective Goodman?
If they did something to him too, the commissioners would have gotten suspicious.
Yeah, 'cause if 2 out of 3 detectives on one case all suddenly get taken care of, that's totally fine, you know?
Nothing big, happens all the time. But if 3 out of 3 detectives in one case get taken care of, now that's suspicious. No, they were careful enough to not be too obvious.
They? Who are you talking about?
Don't get upset, Bambina. I mean Dame McGann, Lana Skye. Chief Detective Dame McGann is second in command Lana Skye. There wasn't a person on the force who hadn't heard of that duo. That case was the biggest step in both of their careers. After the case ended, Lana transferred to the prosecutor's office, right? Yeah, Dame McGann, the new chief of police, arranged for that to happen. She's never been the same since she left. Everyone who knew her said so. Chief Prosecutor Skye was totally different when she was a detective.
Now that he mentions it, Emma said something like that too. Tell me, what happened to my sister?
Sorry, Bambina, but her secret is too well guarded. I never found out.
Lana's secret. It all started 2 years ago.
No kidding. I got the looks, but he got the brains. He was one of the best prosecutors around. I kind of feel like saying both of you got looks, but neither of you got brain. I had just made detective when it went down. It was our first case together.
How old was he, your brother?
He was 27 at the time. He was awarded the highest honor that very day. The highest honor? You don't mean King of Prosecutors? Not that again. What you looking at me like that for? That's an honor for a prosecutor. Mr. Marshall must have really been close with his brother.
The day the SL9 incident took place, that wasn't the same day as...
That's right. Was the day of the evidence transferal.
That is a busy day! Evidence transferal, the award ceremony, and somebody getting killed. Busy day, those.
Interesting. It was drizzling that morning, and by nightfall there was thunder. I can't believe 2 years have gone by already. I tried to steal the evidence so the case wouldn't die. But you seem to have missed the jar shards and the glove, which apparently were on the floor. Okay, the glove fell when you opened, but still. Apparently someone tried to stop you. Detective Goodman was murdered, and the evidence locker was empty. Except for the glove. That's my story. Did you enjoy it, partner? It was much better than last time when I had to look at the video all the time. It was certainly enlightening. There's one thing for sure I found out in court today. That boy Edgeworth ain't my enemy. Of course he isn't. He was the one who used falsified evidence to get a guilty verdict. But someone else was the one who gave him that evidence and planned everything. That someone's Damon Gand. Don't believe me? Well, I don't blame you. I won't even be a patrolman after today. Considering you don't seem to care about your job, I fail to see why you seem to be, I don't know, somehow semi-sad about this. Too bad I won't be around to work with you. When you become a real scientific investigator. Oh, in 7 years it really won't matter. Now just Bambina. Okay. I have the feeling somebody is back now. This place is always pretty empty, but today it's deserted. Except for those two people.
That must mean everyone's busy solving crimes.
No, if you're looking for the others, they're on the conference room. Thanks. Wow, he actually talked to us. Unlike in the few videos ago when he talked with us about Goodman and then gave us the lost item report. With the chief prosecutor saying what she did and the decision about what to do about Mr. Edgeworth, not to mention her statement to the media in tomorrow's trial. There's more chaos going on than Thanksgiving and Christmas put together. None of those are ever very chaotic. I think festive is the word usually used for those.
Sir, we'd like to have a look around Chief Gant's office.
Just head across the hall to the other building and take the elevator to the top floor.
Really? You mean it's okay for us to go in there? I mean, we aren't police officers or anything.
Hey, you're right. You can't go in there. It's off limits. Jesus Christ, if you had just kept your mouth shut, we could have gotten in. Now I see where Detective Gumshoe gets his unique charm.
Well, what are we waiting for? Let's head to the chief's office.
Well, that's certainly... Where am I?
In the chief's office, silly. At least that's what it said on the door.
Check out the pipe organ. That's real, isn't it?
I used to take organ lessons in kindergarten. They used to call me Little Miss Bach. I thought I was a genius until they tried teaching me notes. I never could remember where C was.
Thanks for telling everybody with that note in like a 5-mile radius that we are in here. Oh, hi. Oh, it's you two. Chief Gant. He put that paper he was reading on the desk. So, Mr. Wright, have you been swimming lately?
What is it with you and trying to get everybody into Speedos?
No, I haven't. I've been kind of busy lately. I can appreciate that. I've had my hands full too with Mr. Marshall's misconduct and Lana's provocative statement. Provocative statement? Oh, you mean about the forged evidence? No, it was a provocative statement about freeing Tibet and whatnot. 2 years have passed since that incident. My, how time flies. See that big picture on the wall over there? I noticed something. That's a picture of Lana, Neil, and me. So this is Mr. Marshall's brother, Prosecutor Neil Marshall. We took it to commemorate our work together. Something's not right with this picture. Yeah, a fringed leather vest with a lavender tie. Totally inappropriate. I can't quite seem to put my finger on it, though. Well, if you put your finger on it, you're gonna stick yourself on that spindle-like spear over there. Anyway, I'd like to reminisce all day, but there are matters that need my attention. I'm gonna lock up here, so let's go out together.
Oh, but this office, it was a crime scene 2 years ago, wasn't it?
The head case has long since been over. There's no need to investigate it anymore. All the same, we'd still like to have a look around. Perhaps you didn't hear me. I said there's no need to investigate it anymore.
Yes, sir!
Now hurry up and get out, I have a meeting to attend.
Looks like we aren't welcome.
It seems that case isn't over with yet, after all.
What do you mean?
Chief Gant denied our request to search the crime scene. That means there must be a reason he doesn't want us looking around in there.
You mean like a clue?
There's got to be a way we can get inside the chief's office. I sure seem to be going here a lot today. Hey, pal. Oh, Detective Gumshoe. Were you in a meeting? I was just taking a breather. My feet hurt.
From sitting so long in the meeting?
Actually, I had to serve everyone coffee. Sounds like Detective Gumshoe's still out of the loop. Hey, have either of you seen Mr. Edgeworth? Edgeworth? No. Why do you ask? He's under fire from both the police department and the prosecutor's office. It's almost like the battle's between you two in court. That sounds serious.
Is it because of what my sister said?
That's basically what it all boils down to. That falsified evidence 2 years ago. Now Mr. Edgeworth has the whole world after his blood. Now, it's not like everybody was after his ass to begin with, so really, it's not all that different.
Yikes.
I have a font labeled that. What happens if I show you this? Oh wait, that's not what I wanted to show you. Let me share a little advice with you as a detective. If you don't have a clue, keep your trap shut. I'll keep that in mind. Sheesh. I've been setting up on those files. There's nothing wrong with Mr. Edgeworth's presentation. To think people are accusing him of injustice. I for one ain't buying it, pal.
You're looking into the case for Mr. Edgeworth?
Yeah, it was a pretty big deal while it was going on, you know. No kidding! After all, the serial killer was on the loose. But Lana was pretty clear in her confession. She forged evidence in order to prove Joe Dark guilty. But why would Edgeworth be blamed? It's not like he knew the evidence was forged. Lana Sky's the guilty party here, isn't she? Regardless, the prosecutor is responsible for the evidence he presents in court. I guess so? I mean, if the chief prosecutor hands the lower prosecutor who's going to prosecute the trial evidence, sure, the prosecutor has to, know what the evidence is and that it's right, but given that it came from higher above, you'd think you'd put, you'd have a right to think that it's okay to trust that your superior was the one who actually made sure that they are right to begin with. Sure, in a case where, the higher-ups are forging things is kind of bad, but you get the idea. Not only that, But as you know, there have been a lot of rumors going on about Mr. Edgeworth. Those who don't like him haven't been able to do anything because of his amazing talent as a prosecutor, but now with this.
Are there really so many people who hate him? Actually, when I go on a forum, a lot of people seem to like Edgeworth.
I count myself to them, but I mean, sure, I meet people who don't like Edgeworth, but they don't outright hate him. In our world, only those with talent rise to the top. Mr. Edgeworth not only had that, but he is young. There's no better recipe I know for making enemies. Hey, Dick! Keep up the good work! Yes, sir! Let's go out at lunch again sometime. My treat! Yes, sir! You gotta take me back to that joint sometime, okay, Dick? Yes, sir! Seems you don't have a problem with enemies. Yeah, well, I'm careful to not stick out. Anyway, I'm a bit worried about him. Under all this pressure, I'm afraid Mr. Edgeworth just might crack. Yes, we all have to worry about Edgeworth. Because he is Edgeworth. Actually, I took a look at the file earlier while the coffee was brewing. Either you have a slow coffee brewing machine or you're a very fast reader, Gumshoe. He seems generally concerned for Edgeworth. Unlike some people, Phoenix. Well, did you find out anything? The only evidence Dark left behind was during his final attack. His final attack? You mean when he killed Prosecutor Marshall who was trying to protect some girl?
Me?
It seems Detective Gumshoe never realized Emma was the girl. That's when he left the most incriminating evidence of all.
Well, what was it?
Let's see. Yeah, I think it had something to do with the murder weapon. Oh, I forget. Look, it's all written somewhere in here, okay? Once again, no it isn't. All we have here are names, and not evidence lists or anything like that. Stop trying to tell me there is something actually in here. Or at least something I can check. His powers of recollection never fail to impress.
Maybe we should show him the murder weapon. It might jog his memory.
Okay. Oops. There was something else to talk about there. Joe Dark was 42 at the time of the crime. He was just your run-of-the-mill businessman. A businessman? What made him turn to serial killing? One day on his way home from work, he hit someone with his car.
With his car? So it was an accident?
An accident, yes, but it transformed him into an animal.
An animal?
He killed a man that witnessed the accident. Then he killed a lady who saw the second crime. A kid walked by just then, so he killed him too. Then when he was burying the bodies, a jogger came up on the scene and was killed as well. Finally, he turned himself in. What? Okay, first of all, that sounds more like a killing spree rather than serial killings, especially because serial killings are generally done when the way of killing and the crime setup are identical. Unless he suddenly, I don't know, just drove his car onto the sidewalk and ran over these people with his car. Not really a serial killing. This is a killing spree, and he'd be more of a multiple homicider than a serial killer. Also, he turned himself in. This makes it sound like it all happened within a span of a few hours. And I'm not sure if it's been mentioned yet, or if it's gonna be mentioned, but they say it took them like 6 months to finally get him. And they say that he suddenly turned himself in shortly after killing the final jogger. So they're already contradicting each other. I mean, I'm tempted to give Gumshoe a little leeway since he wasn't actually in the investigation, but he does have his hands on the files and he did read through them, so unless the files themselves are contradictory all over the place. Seems it was a pretty careless animal. Well, of course, this is all conjecture. There wasn't a single shred of evidence. So no evidence at all, compared to the original saying of nothing decisive, compared to desperate for anything, and then saying, as Jake did recently, that they did have evidence, but, you know, it wasn't there. So he turned himself in, instead of being asked to come in for questioning. Yeah, but in the middle of his questioning, he fled and murdered his final victim, Prosecutor Marshall. The onion hair! And that crime was witnessed by someone too, but fortunately he was arrested on the spot. It's a good thing that last witness wasn't killed. That last witness... He must mean Emma. Yeah, good that she, you know, survived long enough to be a narc. Oops! I was going for this. About this. Hey, don't tell me that's... It has a tag attached to it with the label SL9 incident on it. I believe this would be the broken murder weapon you were speaking of. What are you doing with that? Ever since that case was closed, that knife's been locked away in a locker. Didn't you come to the peanut gallery? I mean, Edgeworth's prosecuted, why weren't you there? There's nothing wrong with you, you know, joining the trial and observing it as a peanut gallery observer. You could have done that.
On the day Detective Goodman was murdered, this suddenly disappeared from the locker and was found in Mr. Edgeworth's car's muffler.
That's it! Now I remember what that incriminating piece of evidence was. When you showed me that knife, it all came back to me.
Well, what is it, Detective? Quick, before you forget again!
This knife, it was Joe Dark's, wasn't it? That's right. We traced it back to the store he brought it at, and it had his fingerprints on it too. Okay, Japan actually has a pretty tight gun control, but people can just buy switchblades for, like, no reason?
But no one actually witnessed him using it to murder anyone, right?
And that's where his luck ran out. When you take a good look at the knife, you'll see it's broken.
You don't have to take a good look to notice that.
Yeah, well, anyway. Take a guess where the broken off tip of the knife was found. That's what did him in.
Where was it?
The victim, Neil Marshall, was carrying it inside his own body. It was found deep inside the stab wound. Did it match Dark's knife? You bet, down to the last fiber. I don't think knives are made up of fibers.
That's pretty conclusive.
What do you mean added? You mean updated? Well, there you have it in a nutshell. That's all I know. Can I ask you one more thing? What is it? If it's money you need, you should ask Chief Gant. It's not money, but it does concern the chief. His office is a crime scene, right? It's where Prosecutor Neil Marshall was murdered.
The chief's out now and his office is locked. But we'd like to have a look around if that's okay.
Well, any detective's ID card can unlock the door.
What? Really?
But if I let a civilian in there, I'd be charged with breach of trust.
No, not breach of your everlasting penetrating bond of trust that you have with prosecutors and other detectives. Breach of trust?
Simply put, I'd be canned. Oh. Sorry, pal. I don't plan on getting fired because of you.
How about this ID card? It was Detective Goodman's.
That won't work either. The data was deleted the day he died. So around 5/18 when Lana was arrested, I guess. At least that's what I'm guessing.
Oh,
So in other words, Gumshoe's our only chance of getting into that office. Or we could steal some other detective's ID, but yeah.
I wonder if there's something we could show him that would make him change his mind.
Well, Edgeworth will always change his mind. No one's here today, not even the star.
Everyone's probably busy looking into what exactly went down in the evidence room.
No, everybody's in a meeting about what Lana said and all.
Weren't you listening? That must be where the detectives are.
But we proved in court today that no one was murdered in the evidence room at 5:15 p.m. on the day of the crime. No, but you gave the possibility that something went down before 5:15.
Yeah, I thought we were finally making some headway in our case.
But instead, it looks like we just ended up making Lana look even more guilty.
Hang in there, Lana.
I've got to find all the answers by tomorrow. Whatever. I want to go into the Fuchsia Lounge. I wonder if Edgeworth is back yet.
There he is! It looks like he's writing something.
And you didn't see him when you entered the office because... What are you doing here? He sure was quick to throw that paper on the floor. Tough day in court, huh? Phoenix. I've had to live the past 2 years with rumors flying around. What's another allegation to me?
Cheer up, Mr. Edgeworth. I'm rooting for you.
That's Edgeworth for you. Always trying to hide his real feelings. So what do you want? Unlike some people, I don't have all day. You know, it wouldn't hurt if you put this up somewhere, like on a shelf. That has no meaning for me anymore. What do you mean, anymore? That's who I was last year. What good is it to dwell in the past? He's asking me?
That makes me kind of mad. Actually, something's been troubling me about this shield. Look, do you notice anything different?
Different?
Yeah, don't you remember? The other shield in the court record.
I guess I'd better present the other shield. This picture was hanging on the wall in Chief Gant's office. Prosecutor Neil Marshall. He had just started making a name for himself. Looks like this was taken when he received the King of Prosecutors trophy.
Speaking of that, there's something that bothers me.
Yes?
The trophy Mr. Marshall's holding. It's a little different than yours.
Yes, you're right. I remember now. Remember what? That was the official prosecutor trophy used until that time. There's a story behind it.
A story?
Sounds interesting. Would you mind telling it to us? It's simple, really. Contradiction. That's what the award's based on.
Okay.
This award originates from an ancient Chinese tale. I'm glad that the localization didn't change it into an old Canadian tale or something. In Chinese, the word contradiction is written with 2 characters. The first means halberd and the second means shield. Have you heard the story? Me? Sure, everyone knows that. Why don't you tell it though, for Emma's sake? Very well. It's not like I can't figure you out, Phoenix. Long ago in the kingdom of Chu, there was an arms merchant. One day, he presented the king with 2 items. The first was a halberd he claimed could slice through any shield or armor. The second was a shield he claimed could withstand any weapon. Wait a minute! Those claims contradict each other! very perceptive. But then again, you've heard the story before, right? Anyway, as you mentioned, the very descriptions of these items discredit them both. When the king pointed this out, the merchant was left speechless. I hope he exploded in one of those over-the-top villain breakdowns as well, throwing his other merchandise all over the place. And thus the Chinese word for contradiction was born.
Oh, I see. So the chipped shield and the broken knife symbolize...
Precisely so. They symbolize the merchant's item. The ancient tale ends with the merchant at a loss for words, but it's in our nature to pursue matters to their conclusion, even if it results in something as ugly as this.
Wow! Thanks, Mr. Edgeworth. I learned something new today.
That's funny. If that's so, then why were you only given a shield? You'll have to ask Chief Gant. Well, I'm sure he'll have a perfectly legitimate reason to do so. 2 years ago, he had the halberd part of the award abolished. Chief Gant. Okay, let's talk about the rest. There's no excuse for what I've done. 2 years ago, I used false evidence to obtain a guilty verdict. That's what it all breaks down to, and nothing I can do can erase that fact. But you didn't know, did you? I mean, that the evidence was falsified. The police department and the prosecutor's office share a bond of trust. If that bond is broken, we stand to lose everything. The police department's error is my error, my responsibility as the prosecutor in charge. What about the chief prosecutor? That's the one who is the prosecutor of the prosecutor in charge. That fact remains the same, no matter what excuses I might have.
Mr. Edgeworth...
I take pride in my work. So tell me why. Why has it all come to this? Even Edgeworth can't keep this kind of emotion bottled up. Are you up for the trial tomorrow? First last year's trial, now this one. Seems all you do is worry about me. To be honest, you're getting on my nerves.
Aww. But Mr. Edgeworth, you can't just walk out on the trial.
Tomorrow's the last day. It's too late to change prosecutors. Especially because the others are stuff like Manfred von Kalma, who's in jail, Neil Marshall, who is dead, and also the only other prosecutor we have is... Winston Payne. And we do not want Winston Payne. I'll bet that's what my superiors are banking on. I never thought that case would come back to haunt me like this. What do you mean? That list of evidence. It seems too short. Most lists run twice as long. It's only half as long as most lists? That's odd. After Neil Marshall was murdered, I became prosecutor for that case. I may not have been the part of the investigation, but at the time there was only one thing on my mind. I'd use the evidence I was given to prove the suspect guilty.
Say, we just saw a picture taken around that time.
That picture, something seems strange about it. Well, I already pointed it out. Also, given how they keep saying they had no decisive evidence, then they had said they were desperate for anything, and then Jake said they had evidence, it sort of, yes, makes sense that the evidence list is short? Could you tell us again about what happened that day? The day Detective Goodman was murdered? You were participating in a ceremony over at the station, right? I've never cared for ceremonies, but I had to attend that one.
Because you were awarded this?
Those receiving awards can't exactly skip out on the ceremony. What about all the people who get, like, awards at, like, the Oscars and such and don't appear? They can just not appear. I finished up at the office in the morning, then drove over to the police department. You finished up at the office? Yes, just odd and ends, clerical stuff. Always fun to do. I didn't plan on returning to the office that day. That is, until I was asked to take something back.
Take something back?
This.
Oh yeah, Chief Gand asked you to hold on to that, didn't he?
Yes, it was a piece of evidence in a case that was closed half a year ago. He asked me to bring it back to the prosecutor's office. Why isn't really mentioned. I mean, we can pretty much figure out why, but I guess Edgeworth just doesn't ask the superiors why. That's the story we heard yesterday. So you came back here to the prosecutor's office because the chief asked you to? That's right. Well, we figured everything out. I wonder what he was writing before.
Come on, Mr. Wright. Let's take a look.
Are you crazy? Edward's sitting right there.
Just distract him. I'll check it out.
Hey, Edgeworth. Is that Detective Gumshoe out the window there? Oh my god, he's falling to the ground! Hold on. First, let me see what this girl's doing crawling around my feet. That's my favorite sentence in this entire case. He didn't even look.
What?
If you can't read it, I'll read it for you. It says letter of resignation. Resignation? Edgeworth! I'm tired, Wright. Oh, now it's Mr. Wright! Emotionally distancing yourself from us, I feel as if something inside of me has died.
But Mr. Edgeworth, none of it is your fault.
I know the path I've walked. You don't need to tell me. And the path I've walked hasn't been a just one. I can't forgive myself for what I've done. And no one else should forgive me either. Oh, I think he's serious.
Mr. Wright, please, you have to do something.
This letter of resignation. I wonder if I can use it for anything. Yeah, I'm totally gonna use this thing my boyfriend's using to make somebody else do my bidding. Awesome idea! I think we are close to another break. Oh god. Excuse me? Would either of you care for a quarter pound of roast beef? Miss Starr? I guess she's out of lunches. You certainly are the curious sort, aren't you? Kind of like the first person who sucked a cow's nipple to discover milk. I'm gonna say yes. Still, I never thought you'd go digging up that case from 2 years ago. Everyone in this trial was involved in the SL9 incident. Not only that, but the murder occurred on the very day the evidence from that case was due for transferal. This can't all be contributed to a coincidence. Aren't you forgetting something? You know, that little scene I happened to witness. The instant Lana stabbed Detective Goodman with a knife. No matter how much of the past you dig up, it won't change what I saw. Roast beef is meant to be savored when eaten. Miss Starr's hatred towards Lana. It all dates back to 2 years ago. I'm gonna take a break here. I forgot this part was gonna happen, so we're gonna talk with Lana about SL9 next time and also check out Gaunt's office. So,